Hello, and welcome to the Jack Stites Trial School. My name is Dale Malaseck of Action Video. Jack and I are very happy to be bringing you the first Observe Trials video school available, and we know that after you watch these videos and you go out and repetitiously practice the basic maneuvers that we are going to show you, that your riding will improve, whether you be a beginning novice rider, an advanced rider, or a weekend recreational rider who enjoys the excitement and exercise that off-road riding offers. The key to this sport, which is the same in any other sport, is practice and plenty of it. Also, a good, positive attitude and a thorough understanding of the basics is required in order to improve and advance your riding skills. We can show you the relationship and help you understand the relationships between your body, the motorcycle, and the terrain over which you're riding, but then it's up to you to establish a practice schedule which will allow you to become proficient at these basics. Enjoy the video and remember to practice. It's very important to have your motorcycle set up properly for trials riding. The factory riders and the world riders all have their motorcycles set up similarly. What I'd like to do now is go through the basic setup of the motorcycle, and your motorcycle should be set up in this manner. First of all, I'd like to discuss the handlebars. We recommend using the low-rise Tryals type with the 4.5 to 5.5 inch rise. The width of the bars should be about 30 to 32 inches wide, depending on the size of the rider. I also like to use the reinforcement bar in between the handlebar legs to give the handlebars a little more rigidity. The handlebar angle should be from perpendicular to the ground to about back to the fork angle. Somewhere right in between this angle is where you're going to wind up setting your handlebars. If the handlebars are too far forward, the motorcycle steering is very responsive, over-responsive in fact. In a turn, the motorcycle will tend to want to oversteer and fall into the turn. On the other hand, if the handlebars are too far back, this again moves your weight too far to the back of the bike. It makes the steering response very slow, and the front of the motorcycle on climbs will tend to want to rise up and go out of control. So somewhere in between perpendicular, maybe just a little bit back, is where you're going to wind up setting your handlebars. The levers should be adjusted so that they're horizontally, and they should be securely mounted to the bars, but still not secure enough so that they cannot rotate in the event of a rare fall or crash. They will be able to rotate and save the lever from being bent or, what's worse, broken. The throttle control should be mounted in the same way, securely, but still able to rotate a bit in the event of a crash. The clutch adjustment is very important, as is the front brake adjustment and the rear brake adjustment. These four controls, front brake, the clutch, the throttle, and the rear brake, are very important in advanced riding and especially trick riding. In trick riding, the clutch and the rear brake are used about the most, along with the throttle. So, the clutch should be adjusted so that at about halfway back, halfway through its travel, the clutch will become disengaged, or in the event it's all the way in and you let it out, it will become engaged right at that point. This should be one finger or maybe two finger operation at the most. Some of the older motorcycles have pretty strong springs in the clutch, and sometimes 2 to maybe 3 fingers are needed to operate them. But at any rate, on the newer motorcycles, one finger is usually sufficient enough to operate the clutch, and it should take effect right where your finger makes about a 90-degree angle with the ground, At this point, the clutch should be releasing or engaging, depending on which way it's going. The clutch has to be set up in this manner. It needs to be a one-finger operation, not a whole hand operation. It must be one-finger operation for maximum control. The brake lever, the front brake lever, is set up similarly. About halfway back, again, when your finger makes about a 90-degree bend to the ground, at this point, the brake should be just about fully engaged on the front. It should not go all the way back against your fingers, which inhibits or more or less blocks your braking action, and it also makes it extremely difficult to operate the throttle in cases of downhill heavy braking. You need to have the front brake, again, a one-finger operation, with the front brake being maximum application here at about half travel. The rear brake, same manner. It's very important. The rear brake should have about 1 inch of travel. At about halfway down, you're starting to get rear braking, and about another half inch now, that rear brake is fully applied. Your controls have to be set up in this manner for proper trials riding. The front forks and the rear shock should be very soft on a trials motorcycle. Rebound dampening is very important, especially on the rear shock. Check your rear end of your motorcycle. Push it down and make sure that it comes up very slow. If there is no rebound dampening, you're going to have a lot of difficulty riding some of the rocky sections or ledges or whatever. You have to have rebound dampening in the shock, and more is probably better than not enough. The front forks should be set up very soft for trials riding. In the summertime, I recommend a 10 to 15 weight oil. In the wintertime, a 5 to 10 weight oil. They must be very soft for the proper operation, rebound dampening, and so forth. Tire pressure should run about, in the front tire should run about 5 to 7 pounds, and the rear tire about 4 to 6, depending upon the type of terrain you're riding and, of course, the rider's weight. Lastly, but most importantly, is safety equipment. Always wear a good, approved helmet whenever you go out and ride. Also highly recommended are knee pads, because anytime you fall in trials riding, it seems like it's always on the knees. Also, consideration might be given to a riding shirt that has elbow pads built into it. Always wear the approved safety equipment and protect your body while you ride.
Hello, my name is Jack Stites. The purpose of this video will be to give you all the information you need to take this sport to any level you would like. We'll cover 3 things, and that will be stance, body position, and turns. These 3 things are the most important, and everyone needs to start here, no matter what level you're at. And that, of course, is starting at the beginning, and that's where we should start right now. So I'd like to thank Nelson Crouch for coming out and helping us here today.
You're welcome.
Okay. Now, where we will start will be with the feet. Okay. Now, there are several different ways in which you can put them on the foot pegs. I do like using the arches, okay, which is right straight down in here, right in front of the heel. Okay, and that is my preference. The reason for that is when you're standing, just standing here, I mean, all your weight is just coming straight down. I mean, and that's where your weight is. Okay. Anytime you move from that, say if you're coming up on your toes, just slide up on your toes there. Okay, and you're standing there. I mean, you can feel already, if you just stand there just a few minutes, how the muscles and things are tensing up. Okay, and I find that, I mean, over any type of distance or, I mean, you start getting tired. But not only that, it adds another joint in here in which your foot can move a lot, and you can actually get a lot more height, and it's easy to put one down and one up, okay, and it just adds a lot of confusion. And that's why I like to use the arch. I mean, it's firm and it's not going to change. Okay. So let's stand right on that arch. And then, one of the most important things with your feet is that they stay really flat as a good platform, like we were just saying. But anytime the motorcycle moves, right, if your feet don't rotate on the foot pegs, you'll be falling off. Right. So if you just drop your heels back, okay? I mean, you can just feel that weight. It's just falling right off, right? But you see that so often. You see people riding around the parking lots and their heels are, and I mean, it's just, they're falling right off the back of the bike. You know, you see someone like that and you say, I mean, he'll be no problem. Okay. So, we've got a nice stance. Now we'll get right to the legs. And what you want to do is you want to bring them up to a lock, which I think they are, okay? And now just back them off that lock, just a little bit, okay? That is the position you want to keep. You always want to try to keep in that position. Now with your hands, what you want to do, all right, you can see your balance right there, that's good. Because that's what you should always do. And if you don't have a good stance with your feet, I mean, you'll fall off. Now, grab the handlebars. Any bend should be done at your waist. Very good. And now you want to do the same thing with your elbows. Bring it up tight and then back it off. Okay. Real good. Now we have a good, strong stance. Do you notice how, I mean, when you're just balancing here, how your hands are right down in front of you and you can actually just feel the power that you have here. It's good and strong. Or if you, say, are bent, yeah. It's just like standing on your toes. If you stand there with your knees bent, I mean, you're going to get tired. Okay? And the same thing with your arms. I mean, if you're all the time crunched like this, you're going to get tired. Mm-hmm. So you want to be in a nice, comfortable position.
Right.
Okay. Now, one thing on the handlebar position while we're right here. If the handlebars are too far forward, you will be, of course, reaching, and you'll be wanting to fall off the front of the bike. Okay? And the same thing is in the back. If they're too far back, right? You see how it'll be behind you, and you won't really have any strength as if when they're right here. Right. On most bikes, what you can do, if you follow the angle straight up here and the curvature of the bar right here, if you line those up even, that's a good place to start. 90% of the time, if anything, you'll roll them just a little bit forward from that. But that's the place to start. With this next part, it is most important not to do too much. And that's what everyone does too much. All right? And what we'll do here is we're going to lean the motorcycle one direction. Okay? So we'll lean it this way. Now, the only thing you wanted to do, and which you did right, is you notice you ended up extending this a little more. Your leg is extended here. This is bent, and this is bent. Okay? And it's quite easy to remember because now the bike's leaned this way. The foot peg is higher on this side, and the handlebar is higher. This is farther away, and that's farther away. I mean, so it's very simple. I mean, this straightens, this bends. We come back up. Okay? And that was very simple. Most people can't do that. Okay, we'll come this direction. All right, same thing. Now what most people will do is you see, if you straighten this leg up a little bit, straighten that up. Notice how all of a sudden now your hips are at an angle this way, and also your shoulders are. So you're immediately falling to the inside. Okay, so if this is not bent and this is not bent, you're in trouble. Okay, right. So bend them back up, get straight. Okay. No, not that way. Okay, there you go. Now, if you let go of the handlebars, what happens? Nothing. Right? Very simple.
Problem.
Okay, grab a hold again. Now we'll come back up, straight, just like we were when we started, straight up and down. This way, same thing. Now, the bike should move back and forth, back and forth. Now, what usually happens to people when you do this is that I am going to stop in just a second, and then your stance will be wrong. I stop. What usually happens here, and you're not bad, Nelson, you're doing all right. But see how your knees were starting to slope? Most people, when you do that, they'll end up and they'll be sitting like this. I mean, you'll end up
further
squatting.
down each time.
Right. And that's what's so hard about it, is because it comes down this way, over, over, and back up. And there you are. And what most people don't do is they do not extend that leg.
Right.
And that's where the problem begins. You have to extend that leg. And the same thing with the arms. Okay. And so, good start.
All right.
Now that we have our basic stance and we know how to move the bike between us, the next thing we want to do is to turn.
Okay.
Now, what I'm going to do is turn the handlebars, and I want you to do as little as possible. I mean, only what the bike tells you it has to happen, nothing else. All right? Okay, that's it. So what did you do? I mean, just really,
Move the arms.
that's it. All right, but you can see your hips are starting to slide a little, okay? Because if I come back, see how you had to correct it back? Okay, so that's just, all right there. Now, without the bike leaning, this is all there is to a turn. That's all there is, nothing else. I mean, it's too simple, but that's it. But just like a street bike, the bike needs to lean into the turn. Now, we bring it back to our original spot. Now, we lean the bike a little this way. All right, and you're balanced. You let go,
Right.
let go of the handlebars. You balanced?
Yes.
Okay, good. Grab hold. Now, we turn the bars. Okay, but if you notice, what happened here? When I turned, okay, get it lean. Of course, this is straight, straight, bent, bent. Now, when we turn this way, you see you're getting a bend in here instead of here. Because you want this bent and that straight. Okay? Very good. So now, it's just like we were here. So it's over, turn. Right? Because this is bent, because this is
Right.
closer, because we're leaning this direction. That's it. That's all there is. All right? Now, bring the lean back up. That's it. Same thing this direction. Turns over. Ah, see how you're turning your shoulders already?
Yeah.
I mean, you don't want to do that. You don't want to do anything. There. Straight, straight, bent, bent. That's the start. That's it. All right, for a quick review. Now, we know we have a nice stance with our feet. All right, we come up. We brought our legs to a lock. They come off. Right, we bend at the waist to reach the handlebars. We don't have a whole lot of pressure in our hands. Right, it's a good balance. You can let go, of course, the handlebars and you're perfectly balanced. No problem. Okay. Now, and when the bike moves, it comes over. We straighten, straight, because you're pushing it down away from you, right, into a turn or just lean the bike. This is bent, this is bent. And of course, an easy way to remember is that that foot peg and this handlebar is closer to you.
Right.
All right. Now, for the turns, it's turned over, and you don't want to move this. You want to keep a nice, straight, balanced. And we get a lean. It's the same thing. Straight, straight, bent, and bent. And back up, over. Same thing. But you can see here, if you let go of the handlebars, what happens? See you're falling over a bit? You notice you don't have this bent. And that's giving you, so this also brings this down, because when this is straight, it lifts that elbow up. Okay? And if that's not bent, right, so you need to bend it to get your shoulders level, right? Okay. So, it's a good start. Now let me move around the rear, and just so I can get a good look from the front. As the bike leans, okay? That's what you want. And when the bike stops, you want to make sure your knees aren't bent too much. You're always in that good stance. All right, very good. All right, now let's turn the handlebars like we're making a turn. Okay, and once again, you're just moving the handlebars, because when you move your shoulders, you see, you're starting to kick your whole body out of whack, so you want to keep those just nice and straight. And bring the handlebars back straight again. See how they're not moving? Okay, turn it back in a turn. Now the bike, of course, has to lean into the turn. As it leans, All right, this is going farther away. That straightens, straight, and the other side is bent and bent. All right, come back over. Now turn it into another lean this way. Okay, straight, straight, and then bent, bent. Okay, very good. All right, now we're showing you a lot of the basic techniques, and what we have to do at this point is to be able to learn how to use them. All right, there's lots of power that you can have between your hands and your feet. And right now we're going to try to cover the points on just where the power is and how we can learn how to use it. And right now I have poor Nelson driving through, and I'm going to put mild pressure on the side of the bike when he drives by. And all he has to do to correct it is either by pushing or pulling on the handlebars and with his feet. Now this first time through, I should be able to push him, and you should probably watch his knees, and one knee should probably tuck in towards the gas tank, and I should be able to push him anywhere I want. All right, just give it a try. So I'm going to push on the back of the bike, and I've told him to go as straight as he can. All right, he's fighting. Notice how he's pushing that one knee, the right knee against the tank? All right, I've told Nelson to drive straight to that camera, and I am going to actually take his bike and I'm going to pull it towards me. And watch his knees. Well, when we first talked, I had mentioned about how we want to stand and how the bike moved back and forth. Now, when I pushed, it put a little pressure against the motorcycle, of course. But what your reaction was, I mean, both knees went out, then the body's up and a leg against the gas tank. What we want to learn is that when we have that pressure, we push the bike into the pressure. Okay? And you just end up standing right in the same spot. Okay. That's what we want. What I'm going to do is I'm going to ride up just like Nelson did. I'm going to try to go straight for the cameras. And I will try to keep my body nice and straight and to push into where he's leaning, or where he's pushing. But when Nelson pushes, okay, now he's pushing me. Now I'm pushing down with my left hand and with the left foot. What we're trying to show you here is the power you have in the motorcycle. You have the control on being able to push and to pull. If I want to come this way, you can just absolutely push. You straighten that leg, straighten that arm, and you pull up. Right? And there's lots of power in there. And you'll be amazed. The more you do it, the more you'll get. All right? The one place you don't have, out of your 4 points, which is your 2 hands, 2 feet, if I'm leaning this direction, this foot on the upper side, because you can't very well come underneath the foot peg, right? So you're here. If I want to come this way, just push it down. And push. All right? Just for a little demonstration, Nelson, we'll get up here, and I'll have it in a small lean, okay? And then you try to push me over, okay? You can see how I can add that extra effort in there where I can push. Just that push down. And that's that power. And you have a lot there, and you'll never, no matter how much you practice, I mean, you always can find more. And that's what you want. Just that power. Lots of power. Okay, Nelson, what I want you to do is to take your toes and point them in towards the cases. All right? And now bend your knees. Okay, and what's happened? They're just kind of going straight into the gas tank. Mm-hmm. Right? Now do just the opposite. Take your toes and then stick them out a little bit. All right, now bend your knees again. And see how you get the difference of the legs going out? Yeah. So you always want to have your toes. I mean, you can start by being straight and then stick them out just a little bit. Not drastic. But you want your legs to come up at a nice angle, just right up in here. Okay? And it'll give you the most strength and the best for your structure and the power with your feet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send... with this exercise, I'm going to have him do circles around me, and I'm going to push on the side like I did in a straight line. But the reason I'm doing this is so that he can feel where he has to push. Because like I said, I mean, you've got to straighten that leg and straighten that arm, and you're pushing down. And with this exercise, when I push, you can feel it. And after a bit, I mean, I should be able to push real hard. All right? So Nelson, let's just come around. Okay, now when I start pushing, you got to You need to straighten that leg up. Straighten that leg up. Straighten out. Okay. See how your right knee is starting to push in towards the tank? All right, be careful of that because you're losing strength there. Okay. So you just push, push. Okay. It's getting better. Keep pushing. All right, you can push harder than that, so I can still push you over. Push. Yeah, that's better. Much better. Yeah, real good. Real good. What you should do is find a friend that you ride with and do that exercise, and you can feel the points that the bike's pushing against you and what you have to do to control it. And that is the key behind just about everything with this sport. It's keeping that bike the direction you want to go. It doesn't matter if it's on off cambers, because that's where the same type of pressure is happening. The hill's wanting to push the bike downhill, but you know how to control it because you can push it back.
Right.
Right? And as you can see, when you're in this position right here, you're just as balanced as you are on the flat ground. You see, I can basically let go and keep balance. I mean, it's right at that point. And so really all you have to do is you just stand here on top of the motorcycle and keep yourself balanced. If you notice how the heels are, because if I had those heels back now, I mean, I wouldn't even be close to being able to hold my balance. But if they're at a good position, good firm platform, you see, I can just stand right here. And I have the same control I did before on being able to move the motorcycle back and forth. You see, it's just all right here. So, as you can see in this next stage up the hill, really almost nothing has changed. You're still standing straight up and down. You can see he's standing right on the ground. Okay, and basically, especially the legs, are just the same. I mean, I'm quite far over the front of the bike now, but that's because I'm balanced. Okay, you always want to keep balanced. And once again, I still have the control moving the bike back and forth. Okay, when I'm at this portion of the turn, this is really the hardest point. You notice this elbow right here. I mean, it's just right in my face. And if I don't keep that bent, I'm going to fall off. And so you've got to bend this elbow, okay? You've got to. It's the most important. Okay, so it comes in, I'll be leaning towards the turn. This will be straight, straight, and bend that elbow. All right, and right about here, we're halfway around the turn. All the way through this turn, you should always be balanced. Okay, right over the top of the bike. And really, at this point, I mean, the bike is wanting to fall downhill. And at that point, of course, I'll turn in the hill, and the bike will lean down to it. But you will always want to keep right in that centered position. And that is very important. Keep balanced at all times. And keep yourself pretty straight, because you notice, I mean, my knees aren't bent down. You've got to keep a good stance. Keep right on top of the bike. All right, when you get to this point, which is, of course, downhill, the old school used to be to stick your rear as far back as you can. But what you want to do now is you want to bend your knees, okay, and still keep that same force with that power between the motorcycle and your legs and your arms. And so it's just bending at the knees and keeping yourself still pretty balanced. As you can see, the final part of this turn, the knees are really bent, but I still have that same stance with my arms. I mean, they're just off lock, and I still have all the power I need.
Now let's watch some of the top world riders and see how they apply these basics to their own riding. This section from the 1985 Belgian World Round is an excellent example for the demonstration of the basics by the riders. Of course, if you're a beginning rider, you won't be riding a section of this magnitude yet, but as you practice and gain experience and correctly apply these basics to your own riding, you'll find a section like this to be fun and challenging. We'll watch various riders from all over the world in these next scenes, and as you watch them, establish and store in your mind a mental picture of the correct form of the rider so that the next time you go out to practice, you can recall that mental picture and match your own riding form to that of the one in your memory. This is called mental association learning, and it is a very effective way to learn a coordination maneuver. If you have access to a video camera, have someone video you while you practice and compare that with this video. It's most effective if you can watch yourself ride, find the weak areas, and then go out and practice them until you have achieved the proper basic form. We'll watch these riders twice. First in normal speed with audio so you can hear the engine RPM, which is also throttle control, then again in slow motion while we describe and analyze his ride. Really concentrate on this now, as it is a very important part of this lesson.
As you watch this, really keep an eye on the posture of him. How he wants to be straight up and down here. Just nice and vertical, just straight up and down. Coming in the turn, you'll see that outside elbow start to bend. On the downhills, we have the knees bent. But we're still keeping some flex in the arms. That knees bent, flexing the arms. Notice the feet, nice and flat. The turn, outside elbow. Downhill again, knees bent, flexing the arms. Outside elbow. It's real important to keep nice and straight right over that bike, keeping nice and centered. You can see he's really just straight up and down right now. He comes into the turn. He needs that outside elbow. You can see him leaning that direction. Coming right up. Notice that elbow right there. His fist is almost right in his mouth. And here he is, back centered right over the bike. Notice this whole time his feet are either flat or facing forward for acceleration. And right over the top of the bike. Starts a downhill. Of course, the knees get bent. If you notice, even on that downhill turn, he still bent that outside elbow. Just leans it a bit on the turn, outside elbow again. Drive right out. Eddie Lejeune. As he approaches this, you can also see he's straight up and down. You almost draw a line straight up through his feet. Nice and flat. Just very relaxed on that bike. Just always keeping his centering. Same position on the downhill. Bent knees, flexing the arms or the elbows. Get a little bit of acceleration right here to come up this bank. It'll coast up it. Into the turn, outside elbow bends. Just nice and relaxed. Coming in the turn, of course, outside elbow. It's going a bit of an uphill, so the bike comes right to him, but he stays right over that center line. Just see very casual through here, just really standing on the bike. He does this turn a little quicker. He comes in and brings it right up, just like Terry did, bringing that elbow right up into himself. But he used a bit of clutch right there to stop the turn. But being centered, all right, you can not only go forward, but it's the same position you need for going backwards. So if you are centered, things like this are really no problem. But right in here, he's coming up. He's just starting to follow the right-hand side. See him leaning in? He lost his centering. And of course, the position for downhills, bend your knees, a little flex in the elbows. This is Tony Scarlett from England. We really want to watch his feet here. He does a lot of nice things, especially under acceleration, and he'll point the toes down a little bit. See right there? He comes out, the bike comes down flat. The feet, of course, are flat. Look at the foot pegs right under the arch. A good, solid stance. Acceleration, the toes go down just a bit. That, of course, to make it so he doesn't fall off the back of the bike. Just right over the center. Steve Saunders, also from England. He rides this a little bit quicker, but his feet, if you'll notice, are still about the same way. He's got the nice flat stance, foot peg right underneath the arch, and then point the toes down just a little bit under acceleration. Steve Saunders again. Of course, always trying to keep centering. And this section, of course, looks very difficult, and it's really testing him to do that. Right, but he's right over the center. You notice his feet still keeping good and flat. Okay, it's real hard in a situation like this not to end up squatting. And you can tell he's going to keep working on trying to stand up. And see, he's getting back up now. Of course, the feet are still in good flat position, real strong, real secure. All the time he's got that finger in the clutch. That, of course, can do a lot to that rear wheel on getting forward motion stopped or slowed or just on a slip. Right here he's making a bit of a right. See how both knees were bent? If he could have straightened the inside, and the same with this turn here, if you could straighten that inside, it pushes that bike on the turn quicker. But of course, Steve does very well. Terry Michaud, once again, coming straight up, trying to keep centered on the bike. It's in good shape right here. A few distractions. Bend that elbow. But when he drops in here, watch how both arms collapse. See that? Falls right down on top of the bike. And that is what started his problems. He got all that weight on the front, the rear tires started to bounce. But notice how you use that dab. But a lot of times, if you use it too far like that, you're going to need another. But it's a good point to make is to, when you put your foot down, use it. And get yourself back on top of the bike. See him standing right back up again. Staying right over the center of the bike. Okay, of course the feet. Right hand turn. Notice that elbow. Outside elbow, of course. Left hand turn. Right hand elbow. Left hand, of course, is straight. Inside, you straighten that elbow. Louis Galanc. It's a nice little set of turns right here. And of course, look at that elbow bend. Outside elbow. Comes back on a flat spot. Turn in the other direction. What happens? Outside elbow. I mentioned a little bit about starting to squat. All right, look how he's getting lower and lower on this bike. I mean, he just ends up getting lower and lower. He's lost a lot of the control of that bike because he's not standing up. I mean, he might as well just sit down at this point. But if you notice also those feet, look at the angle they're at. But say he's starting to stand up, feet come back down. But the point to be made, don't squat. Stand up on that bike. Hey, Lejeune, this is a really good form through here. He comes up, bike leans in, look at him straighten that arm. Inside arm, straight. Outside elbow, bent. Same thing with the legs. Inside straight, outside bent. He comes back around onto the flat. Look how the whole transition takes place. Comes right back. Okay, look at both arms. Just boom, he's centered on the bike. That's the same thing in the other direction. Terry Michaud. Watch how he corrects right here when the rear tire hits. Both knees. Well, if you know from the lessons so far, we don't really want to correct that way. But we'll go on to that farther later. All right, the point. is to stay straight over the bike, doing as little as possible. Notice his feet are nice shape right there. But look at him squat right here. I mean, that's not really standing up nice and straight, is it? And in here, he's just getting a bit of trouble pulling in the clutch, about falling off. But that is really just using everything you have. And that's what you really don't want to have to do. This is the French riders getting in a little practice before the 85 World Round in Rhode Island. You know, besides just being a casual type thing, you can tell how just loose and they are on the bike. I mean, just real comfortable. And a lot of that is just from lots of practice, spending a lot of time on the bike. You know, when you spend time on the bike, you get used to it in all different situations. Okay, right here, you can see his stance. He doesn't use his legs as much as I would, you know, tell someone to, especially when you move the handlebars in one direction or the other. You know, usually it means you want to make a turn, and that's what I like to have with people because you get a stronger type base of riding. Okay, if he starts a turn here, he turns the handlebars, you should usually move your legs too to start the bike leaning in that direction, and it adds for a real strength in driving the motorcycle. Okay, if you notice, he's using his finger, of course, on the clutch, and quite a bit, because you can use it so you don't put torque to the ground in all the situations which would happen if you didn't. For instance, up right here, when he gets right to this point here, he'll pull on the clutch and that'll stop that tire from spinning. And if he didn't, it would have kept spinning. And right in here we have the advanced bits on moving the front wheel around or backing up, and also for blowing horns right here. And the next tape will go into this quite in-depthly anyways. For right now, we're mostly concerned with stance, keeping centered on the bike, and learning to use that bike below you. Use the bike and not your body. With bike setup, this is where it's real important. If the clutch isn't working well or your brakes aren't working well, you will not be able to do this type of thing. And of course, if your motor is not running cleanly, you're not going to be able to get the acceleration to do things like this. And notice how that rear tire is not spinning there? Because he had just slipped the clutch right there.
Joli.
Terry Michaud once again. Right here, I think, proves a point more than almost anything we've done so far. He's climbing this hill. Of course, he needs to be nice and centered at this point. Coming around, getting ready for it. All right, but if his style is not correct at the top of this hill, he would have been in a lot of trouble. But it was correct, and it really did not matter what happened. See him right centered over this bike? Now watch this elbow. Look at him, right up on there. That leg almost straight on the inside. And he's up on straight now. So the bike is absolutely just skipping downhill at this point. But you see he's balanced. That elbow is bent, and he's just perfectly balanced. And the bike will just scoot right around the turn for him. I mean, that is really well done right there. Very well done. Of course, for the downhills once again, it's going to be coming around, getting ready to come down. By keeping this position of just the bent knees and flexing the arms, see, he's got the control to move the bike in the air, puts on the front brake to kick that rear over a little bit. But see, he's just nice and centered, right on it now. Just like a flat ground, which he is. Be making a left turn. Left turn, of course, the outside elbow. It's going to start to bend right in here. But he's in trouble right about here. He's using a lot of clutch at this point, too. And that, of course, is to keep the front wheel down, like right there. Just slipping that clutch, trying to keep some control. And make it so that front wheel doesn't flip.
Obviously, there is a right way to crash. That is, without damage to your body or bike, especially to your body. Damaged bike parts can be quickly replaced in most instances, but usually serious body damage takes time to repair itself. Unfortunately, most crashes take place when you're first learning, and as you gain experience, you begin to know what the bike is going to do, but more importantly, how to control it before the crash gets too far underway. Most of the time, just pulling in the clutch and laying the bike down on its lowest side will be sufficient enough to control the situation. This is why you should ride with one finger on the clutch to have total control of the forward motion of the bike. Every once in a while, though, this action is not enough. You will be going up a ledge or climbing a steep hill or riding a sharp off-camber, and for some reason, the bike starts going out of control. You may be just enough off balance to not be able to control it, even with the clutch pulled in. This is the time to get clear of the bike, because anytime you're not balanced yourself, you definitely don't want to be trying to hold on to an out-of-control bike also. As you walked the section beforehand and noted the difficult part or parts of it, you should also have checked out the landing area around these parts so that you know what you're going to land on in case a get off the bike situation develops during your ride through the section. Loop or trail riding usually gets more dangerous as the speed increases. The more speed, the further the body rolls unless something stops it. Experience and discretion will usually tell you how fast to go. Remember, nothing is worse than a high-speed downhill get-off. In these next scenes, we'll review some crashes, controlled and uncontrolled. Notice that most of the experienced riders will tend to pull the clutch and hold on to the bike as they lay it down or stop it. Usually the bike is under control of the rider. Even though he is off balance, he's using the bike to stabilize himself during the fall. However, if you're a beginning rider and you somehow launch your bike off a ledge or other heights, by all means, protect yourself first and let go of it. Use your common sense first, backed up by your riding experience. Keep your riding safe. If you're not sure about a section, watch other riders ride it. Study how they negotiate any difficult part. Then, if you're still not sure of your ability to ride it, pass it up. It's much smarter to be safe than hurt. The following scenes here are from the 1983 Texas Nationals. A few of them will be a bit blurry and jumpy, but we decided to use them because they contain a good example of what we were trying to teach. Steve McNeil, the first rider, doesn't make the ledge, pulls the clutch, jumps off backwards, and wrestles the bike down to the ground. Fairly good technique here for an expert rider. He knows his landing area is smooth, no rocks, obstacles, and he can get off safely. Pete Buston, Canadian rider, lays the bike down and jumps clear into the landing area. Another Canadian rider, Dave Thomas, and again doesn't quite make the ledge, gets a little offline, maneuvers his bike over against a tree, and where he safely comes to rest. Good maneuver on his part. Next rider, Morgan Cavanaugh, again doesn't make the ledge, pulls the clutch, and steps off backwards. Very good technique here for an expert rider. This is a safe get-off if you have the experience to do it. Ron Como, a word for safety equipment here. Watch his right elbow as it comes down on the ground right there. Not enough can be said for wearing helmets, knee pads, elbow pads, whatever it takes to protect your body while you ride. Kurt Comer has just shifted to second gear. He's going to demonstrate how a bike can come out of gear when you're just about up a ledge and how to take care of it. Here he accelerates for the ledge. Now whether he bumps the shift lever with his foot or what, but at any rate it comes out of gear. Simply jumps off backwards again into the landing area. He knows it's smooth, can make a nice, safe recovery. Kip Webb, a bit of a hill climb here with a fairly steep ledge at the end. Doesn't quite make it up. Lays the lower side of the bike down. Very good technique here on Kip's part. Very safe. And the way not to do it, Davy Burke, same ledge, bike's out of control, and here he kind of holds on to it. Look at his right hand, right down there in the rocks and the handlebar. It's a good way to get hurt. Let go of the bike if you at all can. Kurt Comer is going to demonstrate how to get rid of the bike here. Once again, the same hill climb with the ledge at the end. The front is way up out of control. He pivots around. Goodbye bike. He lets it go, protects himself. Bike slides just stop at the bottom with just a few scratches on the tank. Nothing hurt. Always protect yourself first. At a local event here, this rider, again, a hill climb. And he sees he's not going to make it. Lets go of the bike, gets off, grabs onto a tree, protects himself, and the bike merely lays down. This rider is obviously struggling for speed and traction. He sees he doesn't have it. He gets rid of the bike again. Very good move on his part. And he merely slides down the hill, and the bike rolls out to a stop up above. Another safe maneuver. Much better than hanging onto the bike and rolling back down the hill with your bike. One more rider here. Again, he doesn't quite make it. Another rider grabs for the bike, which is also very dangerous to do. And the bike slides back down the hill after the rider. You should always keep track of where your motorcycle is going after you depart company. It may be chasing you back down the hill. Another local rider. Notice he's not wearing a helmet. This is definitely not recommended. Most clubs anymore in the U.S. have a helmet rule for event days. And even if you go out to practice, it's a good idea and highly recommended to use a helmet, knee pads, elbow pads, whatever else you think might protect you. Always be safe, protect your body, especially your head. And he accelerates up this hill to go over that log at the top. Not quite enough speed. A little dab there to try to push the bike over, and he's not quite far enough over. Sees it's not going to. He lets go of the bike, gets clear of it. It was still revved up pretty good. And in this case, the bike just slides to a stop. And once again, the rider's safe. The bike is not hurt. A novice rider here going over a log. Again, you have to get the front end up to go over a log. He doesn't quite do it. Can't hold on to the bike. Can't pull the clutch. Lets the big idle jet go over the log. But more importantly, he stepped off. He's safe. Same novice section, another rider, same situation. However, this time he was a little more committed. He had no other option than to go forward and roll clear of the bike. Seen here from the 1984 World Round in Watkins Glen, New York. This rider, I think, maybe just a little bit over his head in this section. He gets just about halfway up this section, up this ledge, jumps off the bike. He sees he's not going to make it. His landing area is a bit slick here. He's kind of out of control sliding around. But more importantly, he doesn't know if the bike stopped or not until he turned around and looked at it. Sees the bike has stopped, and he can stop and go back and pick up the motorcycle. Same section, another rider. It's just a little bit out of control here. The back end slides around to the left. Front end goes right, and he's definitely out of control here. All he does is step off, pulls the clutch, hangs onto the bike. This is a very safe get-off maneuver right here. A different section now. Let's take a look how important it is to pull the clutch when you're just about ready to crash. A lot of obstacles before you get to this final ledge. Moves the bike around a lot. His technique is a bit wrong here. However, he should have pulled that clutch a little bit sooner. He still doesn't have it pulled. Right about there, he finally pulls it in and gets the motorcycle under control. This has the tendency to scatter a lot of your fellow riders, plus spectators. Always pull that clutch in. Another rider here, same section. The last ledge. Knows he's not going to make it. Grabs the tree, lays the bike down. Nice, safe get-off maneuver right here. This rider definitely needs to pull the clutch when he gets to the top. Watch and see what happens. Usually what happens, if you don't pull it, the front end comes up and goes out of control. If you can pull that clutch, as he should have done right here, the front end would have came down. He could have maybe dabbed and pushed the bike through and finished the section. At any rate, he did not do it. He jumped off the bike, over the end of the ledge, back down on the ground, and his bike followed him down. Very unsafe. The bike could have landed on top of him or possibly another rider. Always pull that clutch when you start getting into trouble. Good example here, Eric Lejeune, the 1985 World Round in Spain. Tries to get up this slick rock, can't make it, pulls the clutch, steps off, merely lays the bike down. Good way to do it. To show that even the #1 world's rider can have a bad crash, here's his brother, #1 world's rider, Eddie Lejeune, coming up on the same rock. Watch when the back wheel stops spinning. At that point, he's pulled the clutch in. Right here, however, he's trying to get off backwards. It's a fairly high step there. Jumps off too far back, drifts back, goes over the second ledge, and at that point he's in deep trouble. Throws the bike down, saves himself. However, this was a bad crash, but nothing was hurt on his body, and the motorcycle suffered a bent handlebar is all. Pretty lucky.
You don't need me to tell you just how much it hurts to fall down. We've all done it. I've been on film crashing, and I mean, it's no fun at all. But what we want to do is just to let you know that you need to play it safe, and there are ways in which you can protect yourself when you get in these bad situations. All right, some of them, of course, is getting yourself away from the bike. Another one, of course, is keeping the clutch or you pull the clutch in before the front wheel comes and flips over. But the main point we want to make is if you practice the techniques we've given you on keeping centered on the bike, using the elbows in the turns to keep yourself real high on the bike, anytime you run into problems, you will usually have a split second in which you are stopped and still in control. You have lost speed or momentum, but you have not lost your centering. In those situations, you are still in control even though you have failed the section or are about ready to fall. And you have time to make decisions. But number one point, take time to practice your techniques and play it safe and don't ride over your head. For a quick review of everything we've done so far. Number one point again, centering. We want to keep it centered on the machine. All right, and we want to keep a nice, powerful centering on it. For instance, I'm up here. I've got power now to do anything I want with this bike. See, I'm in a good stance, I'm in locked, and I'm relaxed. All right, and I've got good power on this machine. I can push here, pull up here, push down my legs. I've got power. And that's what we're looking for. And the only way you get that is through practice, and lots of practice. Straight line technique, where you're just riding in a straight line, and you take the bike and you move it back and forth this way. All right, be careful that you don't get any of this movement, because that's not really giving the bike any lean. You want lean when you push the bike, all right? Lean. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you several different practice techniques that you can work on. You can do them in your driveway, you can do them anywhere. But it's really the key behind this. Right? And it'll be just simple things, and I'll try to make them as simple as I can. All right, it's the same exercise. See how the bike just moves back and forth? The body keeps straight. This time when I come up, you'll notice when the bike's moving back and forth, you want to be able to keep the front wheel nice and straight. And that's what's really hard. This exercise you should be able to do absolutely anywhere. It doesn't matter, like I said, just like I said, coming at you straight, or if it's up on one wheel. You see, it's the same thing. The bike needs to move back and forth. On this exercise, it's really just the circles, but as I said before, when the bike goes around, you want to lean it into the turn. But with this exercise, it gives you the option to be able to move it to the outside in case you have to. And that's why it's a good idea to do it. And this is what it's like. I need to really stress the fact that on anything you do, it is real important that you do it both left and right. Doesn't matter on turns or anything. You need to find out where your weak spots are and do them. It's also the power you have I kept talking about. It's just so critical. But there is so much power in it, where you can just absolutely just leap the bike really almost right off the ground. But that's all on the feet and the hands. It's very hard to learn. There's a good way to learn it, however, is on the trails during the trials or just to your practice area. When you're going around the turns, just practice keeping yourself centered, and you lean the bike into the turn, and you're just nice and straight. You're straight through here, straight hips, and you just lean the bike into the turn, and you lean the bike into the turn. You'll notice as soon as you start leaning the bike, it wants to make the turns, and that's what we're after. But we want to do it with strength, and the only way you can do that is, of course, keeping yourself straight and using the full bone structure. Really, it starts here, and it just runs straight down your legs if you're pushing, and that's your whole body making the bike do the turn. Same thing over here. It's boom, and your whole body, starting from here, right down, is pushing on that foot peg, right on that firm stance you have. Right? And it's a good, solid push. And when you do this, the bike wants to go where you tell it. One other point is when you're in this situation here, the bike is leaned, all right, we're at a bent and a bent. All right, the bike is actually leaning against this leg now, all right, but the bike, you don't really even need to say it because the bike's going to hit it no matter what you do. This leg right here, that's where the weakness comes in. It'll start to move in here. This is a balancing knee. Not only is it just bent, but that is to correct if the bike is leaning this direction, right? You've got a straight leg here, this is bent. If the bike comes back this direction, this leg is the one that needs to correct it. So it's almost a balancing or a correcting leg. And it's very important to just keep a good, solid, firm on really all your points, hands and feet. The thing to do is you practice and you make it simple and you keep it safe. The next video is going to cover most of the advanced riding techniques. We will be covering steps, different types of weighting and weight transfers, and of course we will be covering a lot of the trick riding. The most important thing is to know your basic techniques, in which we've done in this tape. The more you know about the basics and the stronger you are, the more or the greater this next tape will benefit you. All right, so once again, practice the basics because that's what will make this next tape work for you. We do also recommend several other sources for learning the sport of trials. Len Weed has several books out by Lane Levitt and also Bernie Schreiber, which are quite good. Norm Saylor in Donner, California has quite a good school every year. And also I do give a school every year down here in Florida, plus I do travel the country giving schools. So any of these will give you hopefully enough to learn the sport and to become competent enough that you will enjoy it and plus not hurt yourself. So good luck, and especially practice the basics.
welcome to the Jack Stites Trial School. My name is Dale Malaseck of Action Video. Jack and I are very pleased to be bringing you part 2 of our Trial School video series. This one is going to cover most of the advanced and trick riding techniques that are being used today by the top world riders. In this video, we have shown and explained these techniques in several different ways with lots of slow motion from the top world riders for reference. Practice what we have shown you, be patient, and don't forget to apply what you've learned from part 1 of our basic Trial School video. Remember also that coordination techniques are sometimes difficult to learn quickly, but don't give up. Practice as much as you can. Watch the video again to get that mental picture of the correct riding technique locked in your mind, and you will succeed. Enjoy your riding, keep it safe, and practice.
Welcome to the Trials video part 2. We're going to cover a lot more of the advanced techniques in this video. And before we do, let's just run over what we did on the first tape, just real briefly. With that tape, we covered really the basic techniques used, mostly with your stance and how to do turns. With that, the hardest thing is learning to do it as a natural reaction rather than just a forced move. Now, if your technique is correct, it's going to make the second video so much easier. And the major part is do not give up on this first tape, because it'll take time. With myself personally, it took just about 2 years before it became a natural reaction. But it's repetition really makes the difference. So just keep working on that first tape. Now with this second tape, what we're going to really try to do is to give you a broad outline and just a good base technique on how to do a lot of the other techniques. We're going to start with steps. And with steps, just like everything else in the sport, there are so many variables with it that you need to have a base understanding for what you have to do. And so we tried to do that, of course, with the first tape, and now we're going to try to do the same with the second. So let's run off and we'll do the first part, which is steps. Well, here we have really an easy step. It's really basic, and of course that's what we're after. But also there's something else about it, is that we don't have any real outside obstructions, rocks or anything else to make this difficult. And that's how you want to learn. You want to keep it as simple as you can. Don't have anything outside giving you trouble. All right. Now, what we'll do, of course, the first thing we have to do is to get the wheel up onto here. And we should all know how to do wheelies by now, but if you don't, you'll notice the first thing I do as I approach is that my knees will bend a little bit, and while I do that, it's compressing the front suspension. So I go down, it compresses, and then when I start bringing my knees back up, I'll also accelerate. And that will take the bike and then put it in an upward mode, which of course gets the front wheel in the air. If you're not sure how to do this, go out and practice it in the yard. Just learn how to get that front wheel up in the air, but not just up in the air, in a controlled manner, so you know how high it is and how you got it there. If it's just with a lot of movement with the arms or a lot of throttle, but you need to be real precise. All right, so we're here. First thing I do, bend in the knees and accelerate, and I'm also standing up a little bit when I accelerate. And the reason for that is so that I can compress the rear suspension. And we'll show you what happens with that here in a minute. Now, when the front wheel, say, is about this far away, that's where I'm going to start my lift. My lift will come from here right to the object I'm going over. And really, it's just a straight line from here to here. Now, what I'm going to want to do is I want to continue that same angle straight up. And this is really where you want to start any of your steps. As I'd said earlier, there are so many variables with trials that you need just a good place to start, and that's really it. You pick your line, a nice straight arc. If you start later, say it's a little bit closer, same thing. You keep that same arc. You start here, you run the front wheel just straight up. You do want to touch your object you're going over. There's two reasons. One, it gives you better timing and something that you can really stick with and keep a nice smoother style. And second, it gives you a little bit of stability. And you need that. Starting from the beginning, I'm coming up, bending at the knees, accelerating. The front wheel, say, starts here to here, straight line. Now, what happens if I start out here and do the same thing? Well, there's a couple reasons you don't want to start really early. One, of course, is you've got now a space in which the front wheel, from, say, here to here, you're just doing a wheelie. And no matter what you're doing, you really don't want to do things like that. You want to keep in a controlled manner. And now you're just kind of floating the front wheel around, and if your rear tire is hitting rocks, I mean, you're in trouble. So just take time and just get used to taking the different angles, you know, close up or a little bit farther off, and then feel that straight angle. And just go play with it and play with it. Now, what's going to happen, say I have the front wheel now, I started here, the front wheel now is right here from where I'm standing. Right here. I'm still accelerating because I'm still putting that front wheel up here. Now, right before the rear tire hits contact with the obstacle, I'm going to let off the throttle. Okay, so I'm on the throttle, rear tire just about to hit, and I'm off. Now, what has happened, I had mentioned earlier about compression of the rear suspension when you started your wheelie. The rear suspension is compressed when it hits here. Now you let off the throttle, and it does several things when you let off the throttle. One, the front wheel wants to come down, which is up here. And also, the rear suspension wants to come back up. So now we have two forces. One, the rear suspension wants to go this way. The front wheel wants to go this way. So the combination of those two makes the bike go bang, just like a lever. And if you do this right, the front end actually just smacks on the ground and it goes bang, bang. Now if you have your front end too high, when you hit this way, you'll hit flat into it. Several things happen. One, your momentum is all moving in a flat type of way, and the front end has so far to travel before the rear end can move. And that's why you just go pow, right? Because the front end has so far to go down. Now if you're too low this way, if your angle's real flat, too flat, your skid pan's going to hit. So you want to find that nice spot in between. And you come up, the rear tire hits, and it goes pow. If you keep the throttle on, it's going to keep the suspension compressed, and it's also going to dig the rear tire into the obstacle. And it's going to want to tuck under rather than climb. Also, the rear tire won't want to have any grip onto the obstacle, because when you let off, the rear tire can just kind of mold right up to it and grab onto it. If you keep on the throttle, it'll spin. What I'd like to do is talk just a little bit about using the throttle here. There are really two ways that you can do it. One, which is using a double blip type technique. And that, of course, is starting here, going blip, and you're off the throttle a little bit right when the front tire hits contact. Then you give it a second charge of throttle. Okay, and that does compress the rear suspension a little harder right before you hit an object. And I'll use that when I'm in a very tight spot or I'm out of control. What I try to do is to have a nice smooth throttle where I'll start here and I'll have a nice smooth compression of everything, and I'm smooth, 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 and I'm off and it goes bang, up. And the reason why I like practicing that smooth throttle is that it works anytime. I mean, if you're in first gear, second gear, or third gear. And that really makes a difference just on you being smooth and consistent. Also, when the terrain gets very rough or, say, very muddy, and you need to be using third gear, you don't have time to be doing any double blips. I mean, if you are, you're in trouble. So that's what I like to tell people. Try to learn it on a single blip. It's just one steady throttle, just smooth, smooth, boom. All right, well, now that we have the bike doing all these things with this lever action of going bang like this and all this, I mean, so what are you doing during all this? Well, the first part, when I said when the rear tire hit here, a lot of people talk about unweighting and lifting the weight off the bike, and I don't believe in that theory. There's spots and times you need it, but for your basic plan or your theory behind it, what you want to think about is just letting the bike do what it wants to do. Do not restrict it. Just for an example, if I was here and I didn't bend my legs when the rear tire hit, it's just going to keep pushing that bike into this, and it's not going to let that bike have that lever action. All right, now what happens if I jump off the bike and unweight? That, of course, will make the rear tire hit and bounce. You've probably seen a lot of people do that, where it goes boing and bounces way in the air. Now, what the problem is with that is that anytime the rear tire is not on the ground, you're not getting any grip. And that, if you don't have grip, you don't go anywhere. So if you keep just a nice neutral and let the bike do what it wants to do, The rear tire will stay on the ground and you get all the grip there is. And you need that. All right, so I'm standing straight up on my usual stance. The bikes come up to me, and I'm still basically standing just like I am now. When I'm here, of course, the rear tires just come up, and I'm going to have to bend my legs because the rear of the bike wants to come up. I'm going to let the bike come up because it wants to. Now it's up. Now my knees are bent because it's just come up. This is where you have to remember to stand back up. As soon as that rear tire is up here, you're on flat ground. You need to stand up. Get your stance back. And that will also, when you're straightening your legs, put more weight on the rear tire as it's cresting the obstacle. And that gives you more grip too. And you need that grip. So it comes up, of course your legs are bending, and as soon as you can, you start standing back up. It's putting more grip to the ground, and you're right here, boom, perfect control, ready for anything. As we approach, the knees bend, acceleration gets the front wheel up to where we want to go, and of course we touch it. But there's a couple other things you can do to help with that front wheel lift. One is just touching the rear brake, and that will change the suspension in the bike. It'll actually throw the weight forward on the bike, which helps compress the front end. And you can just ride around and try it a few times, and you can actually feel it. But that'll give you the same aid as bending your knees, and sometimes you may need it. Another is using your clutch. Just a little bit of a slip, and then letting it out quickly will give just a bit of a snap, which will also help with that weight transfer, getting the front end up. All right, but here we go. We're up, we're picking a nice arc. Bang, straight up. We're accelerating, and right as the rear tire about hits, we're off with the throttle. And the bike is here with the front end out, goes bang. And it works just like a lever. Bang. And what are your legs doing? They're just absorbing what the bike is telling you has to be done. No more, no less. So it goes boom. Your legs are, of course, bent here from the rear coming up. You need to stand up. That also helps compress the rear suspension, gives you better grip. But what a lot of people do at this point here is the rear tire is climbing up, is they'll take the clutch and either they'll pull it in or slip it. And that really releases a lot of the flywheel spinning in the engine. Because a lot of times what will happen, especially if you don't straighten your legs, that rear tire will spin just right at the very top. But if you can just give the clutch just a little bit of a slip, it'll slow that rear tire down so it can catch just a little bit of grip, and then you're off. Or you can stop and see where you want to go next. So which gear should I ride this in? But that depends, on so many variables once again. Of course, on the size of this, what speed I want to hit it at, and what am I doing next? And that's always a big problem. Now, when you do get up to this point, if you are balanced, you have the clutch in, you have choices. You can make a lot of choices. Say if I wanted to do this in first gear, I could come up here, I'm in first, and I want to climb up something bigger. I could be standing still, pull on the clutch, which it already is in, balance, pick the gear I want, and continue on. So when you have time and you're using the clutch in spots like this, you have time to think. As I'm coming in, of course, the knees bend, front end comes up, keeps a nice angle, powers off, front end comes down. Just a nice, smooth, easy motion. This time, watch what I do with my legs. I'm coming in, the knees bend, lift the front end. Now, the Bend a little more, and now they straighten right in here. See that straightening? That's compressing the rear suspension even more. And that, of course, makes it so the rear end wants to come up, and it makes a nice lever. This time I'm going to come in. I'm going to have the front wheel too high. And you can see what happens with the front wheel when the rear tire hits. See how far that front wheel had to come down? And that's what held the rear tire from coming up. Just too much of that movement coming down. All right, we're coming. We want to get a good angle. See it come up. See how that angle just gets higher and higher and higher and higher. And that rear tire is so far away, it hits and the rear tire just wants to go boom, right into where it's going and not climb because that front end is too high. With the front wheel too low, you can see I'm starting with the same angle. I'm all right still. But watch how that angle just flattens out. The skid pan goes right into it. That's with the front wheel too low. One of the biggest problems you see is people being really timid. And when you're going up bigger steps, if you are timid, you're going to have problems. You need to know you're going to get up and have the correct speed for it. Now here I come in. See the knees bend, front wheel angle. The bike comes right up to you. A nice smooth movement. Want to stay right on top of the bike. Now watch this point right before the rear tire hits. Right in here. See how my legs are straightening? That compresses the rear suspension. It also keeps your legs straight so you have more room to absorb the bike when it comes up to you. This is a type of a double step. See the front wheel there and there. 2 steps. So the power's got to be off on that middle step. So here I come in, lots of power in here. Nice angle of the front wheel, just skim the top of that. Power's on, legs are straightening a little bit. Off of the power, put the front wheels right on that next step, right where I want it. Now the power's back on, watch the legs. Straightening right up, front wheels up a little bit, so I get a little bit of that lever action. Comes down, I stay right on top of the bike, feet nice and flat, bike comes down, and I stand up as quick as I can. Stand right up, and you're off. these are a lot larger steps still. And he's coming up the first step. And now, of course, he's got a second. He does one thing really differently than most everyone else. Terry Michaud does it too at times. But what he does, he throws the bike in front of him at the top of the step. And see how his body will just kind of stay there and the bike gets thrown all the way forward. And they've learned that really from the bicycles because that's about the only way they can do that. And at times I think it would really help. But as you are learning, you should really learn to just stay on top of the bike and just go up with the bike. Just learning balance, control, staying centered. As he approaches, he'll get the same front end lift. It's a nice arc. The bike comes right up to him. Just nice and centered. He didn't have to pull himself back on the bike. He's right on top of it. For this next step, he's going to have to get a lot of power. And since he has no room to move, of course, the power's got to be on and the clutch is let up quickly. What's called a slingshot. We'll get into that later. But he's got to have his front wheel arc right and have enough speed to get the bike to come up. And in these tight quarters, it's very hard. But nice, centered, balanced, and that comes only from practice. See the front end lift? And just not enough speed. But as I had said, you want to practice your steps on a nice, easy spot. And I can't say that enough. Don't make it hard on yourself. What he's going to do, after he comes at this first step, he's going to keep a little movement. And if you can do that and you have room to get the front wheel up in the air, a lot of times you have better luck. But if you keep your body forward, you can get your feet on top of the step and, of course, push yourself up. The same thing, keeping the speed going in between. But he's up so he can get a nice foot on to push himself forward. But remember, make it easy when you practice. And once you have it, you can go on to some harder things. Watch what happens with the rear wheel on this. See that climb right there? The way that works is that he's running the front wheel in lower than usual, which is really compressing it, which therefore compresses the rear. At the same time, he's compressing with his legs. And the whole bike is pushed downward, and it all wants to spring back up. So here he comes in. Front wheel lift, and you'll see right where he's going to put the front wheel. See how low that is right there? You can see that front suspension will compress. It then compresses the rear suspension, and also the legs are doing compression. See the compression? And all the weight's taken off the bike, and it wants to climb. But you can also see his front end has that same arc as if he started the climb or the step from that point there. The front wheel comes down, rear wheel comes up. Then of course you want to stand up as soon as you can so you're ready for whatever's next. This is just a traditional type manner, just like we were going over earlier. We're just getting a nice, easy, straightforward. Front end comes up. Follows a good arc. He's still on the power. And look how it's standing up. Power's off. Front wheel comes down. Rear wheel comes up. And he lets the bike come up underneath him. Standing up as soon as you can. Front wheel lift. Drives the rear right into it, but the power's off as soon as the rear tire hits. And just stand up and you're ready for something else. On this one, he's going to keep the front wheel just a little bit lower. See that? But he's not giving it quite the same amount of compression as was done earlier. I'm getting that rear wheel lift, but he got just a little bit. But I think what the point would be there is that when you practice, you want to learn as much as you can, and if you have all these different techniques used or know how to use them, you can of course use them at all different points and intermix different things. And the same goes for foot peg positioning, which we'll talk about in a minute. See, he did that same front wheel compression, but his skid pan hit. And there's two reasons why. One, of course, would be that he's not getting the same lift, where he's compressing just a little bit too late. Or if the front wheel was just a little bit higher right here, his skid pan wouldn't hit. So he had two alternatives not to hit his skid pan there. But usually with enough speed, you will make it up. That's not necessarily what you want to do. You'd like to have the correct speed for whatever you're going over. All right, what I want you to do is watch the front wheel height and also the lift you got out of that rear tire. What we've seen before, every time they get some lift out of the rear tire, they hit the front wheel down lower. But his was actually pretty high. Watch that again. You can see he did hit below that point you'd hit in the traditional manner. By doing that, he got the same compression with his front forks, which at that point compresses the rear. But what he does also is that he uses quite a bit of acceleration when the whole bike is compressed, and he has changed his foot peg position so that he's riding a little bit more on his toes. You can see as he comes up, right during the compression, his weight is back at this point, really compressing. And then he brings himself forward, straightens out his legs, which compresses, and then it keeps coming off, which takes his weight off the bike, standing nice and straight up. And then the bike hits, of course, front wheel comes down, rear wheel comes up. But watch how quick he stands up. Before the rear tire is even all the way on, he's standing up. And he's ready for anything else. when you watch different riders, it's good to really watch what they do with their legs, to do with the front wheel positioning, and of course your body position. When he's coming around this turn, you can see him, he's fighting with the lean on the bike. It's leaning a little bit and it's coming back straight a little bit. And by watching the elbow, you can usually tell what kind of lean they have. Especially we talked about that in tape 1. Of course, when you're making a turn, you have that outside elbow bent. We cover the backing up in later in the tape, but the secret to it is using the rear brake. But watch what he does with his legs here. It's very important. He'll put a bend, and watch him straighten. That compresses the rear suspension, which we talked about earlier with the steps, to make it help bounce up. The downhill, what's the legs bend? Drops the weight. Watch the legs again. Downhill just bends at the knees. Watch the legs. Getting that good compression. Front wheel position. Just skim right over the top. Standing right on top of the bike, just bending the knees, just so he can drop his weight down. What's the arc of the front wheel over this log? He starts, just follows the arc, it's off the power, boom, comes right down. Same thing for this next one. Brings it up, but it's a lot bigger, so the rear hits, pushes the front wheel down early, but skims over the top. Speed is very critical when dealing with logs, and it just takes a little practice to find out how much you really need. Of course, smaller ones don't need as much, but just practice will tell you. When we're talking about the steps, we're talking about making sure you have the power off when the rear tire hits it, because the power should be off right there. The same thing here. You can watch the rear tire slip a little bit. Here he comes up. Watch the rear tire slip. See it slide right there? The reason why the tire stopped sliding was because he turned off the power. If you left the power on, it would have kept sliding. Watch the extension he gets in his legs right before the rear tire hits. See him straighten out? That's what compresses the rear. With a step like this, of course, is much bigger, and the real major difference is you need a whole lot more speed to get up. As for front wheel positioning, it depends so much on the type of step that you're going over, and so it's real hard to have a real basic type of understanding, except you don't want to run into it and just go bang, for instance, just go chunk. I mean, you need to have a bit of an upper lift. If you get too much, you're going to hit it flat. If you get too little, you're going to really bounce into it. But it depends so much on the step. But the one thing you do need is speed. Coming in with lots of acceleration, getting the front wheel high enough. There was an undercut in that step, so I had to get the front wheel over it. But it's having your speed early, compressing the rear suspension, and staying on top of the bike. What's the front wheel? No lift at all. I had my speed early and coasted all the way up the hill. Almost all coasting. All right, let's take a look and see what happened to him. He's coming up looking, of course, in good shape here. He gets acceleration. Looking fine, but see the rear tire starting to slip already. See it going sideways, sideways. There's this little lip right there. And you've got to just stay the side of it, or you can't have the power on. If the power's on and it's starting to be slippery like that, it's going to slide. And this tells the story of why you wear safety gear. But in a spot like this, you need to get away from that rear tire and get the engine turned off. Think yourself first, then the bike. See how his stance is just nice and centered over the bike. Relaxed, right over the center. But he'll come around, he'll get his acceleration. He'll see where he wants to go. Accelerate. Now he's off the power. See how the bike just rolls right out? If he stayed on the power, he would have started to slide. A nice centered stance. On the power again, nice and smooth. See, he'll come around this turn here. He'll have this clutch in, and then he'll start building his revs. If you want quick acceleration, you need to have your revs up, and you'll feed in what you want with the clutch. But of course, approaching the step, if you leave your power on, the rear tire is going to slip. So he's under full power right here, and then he's backing off. And that's why the tire grips instead of spins. Coming around the same turn, he just does not get his revs built up. You can see the bike doesn't have that quick acceleration. Getting off the back, but he gets the clutch in real quickly, brings the bike back down the hill, so he's nice and safe. Approaching the step, lots of speed, staying over the center of the bike. Watch the front wheel. Boom, right up. Same thing here, lots of speed. It's the same thing we're doing on the smaller steps. You can see the knees bend a little bit to get the front wheel up, the legs straightening right before it hits. watch the leg straighten out. Off the power. And the bike does a lever. It's a third gear climb. He's using lots of speed. Comes up, but he does something really different here. Of course, he's getting his revs very high, and he's just driving right into the rock. Front wheel just up a bit, and he's still on the power. And when he hits, he's just spinning, trying to get a little grip, which isn't the recommended practice, but you see it got him up. In most cases, you would always want to be off the power after your first initial hit, or at least rolling down off the power. And downhill, of course, bending at the knees. Same hill again, third gear. Getting just a bit of a kick at the top. A lot of revs, feeding in the clutch, watch the front wheel. And having the revs up that high, the rear tire is going to be spinning even though you're off the power. So get your revs early and all the speed you need. You can see he's here just taking the time he needs. And so often we want to hurry once we're in a section, but he's taking his time, getting the line he wants. Just relax, balance on the top of the bike. Starts in the downhill, it's just of course bending the knees. Lots of front brake, stops the bike a whole lot better in downhills than the rear. We will, of course, be covering this later in the tape. You can see as he comes down how the bike is just moving back and forth between his legs. And that was what, of course, we covered in that first tape. But by bending just in the knees and keeping your elbows, of course, just a bit bent, you can take the bike and then just move it back and forth and hopefully keeping your body just straight up and down. But that's where the strength of the power is just being able to stay straight up and down and moving the bike back and forth. And the downhill, just the knees are bent. On a downhill such as that, the front wheel is what does most of your stopping. And as soon as the bike starts getting out of control or going faster and faster, I mean, you're in trouble. But the point is to start slow and keep yourself slow as long as you can. As as you can see what he's doing, he's trying to make a turn and of course a drop off at the same time. He had to keep his front end up or his skid pan would hit. And your regular downhill, just spinning at the knees. Watch how he'll lean the bike into the turn, accelerate, keeping the front end up. On something like that, it's always nicer just to land a little bit on your front wheel first. And it'll use both of the suspensions one at a time rather than both, where you really will feel the jar. So if possible, just land on the front wheel first. Just see what a nice relaxed stance. Just getting to know that bike. Watch how I'll just bring it out just a little bit. Front wheel drop. Boom, boom, with both suspensions. You can see from this how far he has to bring his front wheel out to clear the skid pan. So just do a little acceleration, just to bring the front wheel out. And of course playing with the front brake. But you just want to clear that skid pan. And sometimes when it's higher, you might have to jump all the way off. Coming downhill, clutch in, knees bent. The same thing with this step here. He just wants just enough so it clears skid pan. Watch him just bring it out a bit. See where he just brings that down straight, clears the skid pan, and not out of control, ready for whatever's next. On doing any of this trick riding, one of the main things you have to have is your bike maintained correctly. And that means that the clutch works right, the brakes work right, and the throttle works correctly. Now, you may want just to leave just a little bit of slop here in the throttle. You can just see it move just a little bit. And that's because when you get the bars all the way, occasionally you might get a little rise in the throttle setting, and you can't have that. That's why I leave usually just a little bit in there. Now for the clutch, what I do is when I have one finger on and I pull up to my knuckles, right now it's completely disengaged. The thing will roll backwards or forward. Now I want the thing to be a nice progression out. So I'm just really moving it from here to here. That's all I have to move. And you notice too, it's in a nice flat position. Some people prefer them a little bit lower or a little bit higher. But I think if you're just starting, a good place to start is just a nice flat. So it's easy to take your fingers and rest them on it. And you can be comfortable like this. If they're down, you might be curling your wrist up too far. Or if they're up, you may be dropping your wrist too much. So nice flat. And the same thing with the front brake. What I want to do is when I want the thing to be at a full lock before it hits my knuckles. You can see it's not quite hitting the knuckles. Now you could have it a little tighter, but I find I can get a stronger squeeze when it's just about at that level there. And you need a strong squeeze to be able to do the nose wheelies or any of that type of trick thing. Now the rear brake, I keep mine usually pretty tight. I've got maybe 1.5 inches or an inch playing it now, and usually I prefer actually a little less. I want to be able to lock that without doing very much. And you find you end up having a lot of trouble with your stance because of this rear brake. You find a lot of people can't do right-hand floaters. And that's because they're tucking their foot into the rear brake, which is putting their knee in, instead of being able to keep it straight to be able to push the bike in the turn. So the rear brake is quite hard to be able to keep using, but I like keeping it so I don't have to do a lot of movement with it, keeping it pretty tight. Okay, if you noticed, I used clutch both down in here to sight my line, but I really didn't want to stop, so you can just keep a little movement going, but you have a little bit time to think and you have options. So just feathering the clutch there. When I came in here, I also did the same thing. You don't necessarily have to pull it all the way in. If you just have a bit of a drag to it, you can just more or less just dial the amount of pressure you put into the rear tire. In a spot like this, if I'm stuck, I mean, how will the clutch help you? If you can learn to use just a drag on it and just be able to feel what that clutch does, you can get out of situations like this pretty easily. Because this is pretty steep, but if you can use the clutch, you have a lot of options. Okay, what I'm going to do here is that I'll be slipping the clutch at first so I can feel how much grip there is for the rear tire. And then, of course, you can kind of make your decisions once you figure that out. If I have enough traction to get the front wheel in the air, I have enough traction to keep going. And that's usually a good rule of thumb. Especially when I get up here, there's a bunch of roots and things. If I can get that front wheel in the air and use that same lever action we use for going up steps, I can still get up these things here. But you can see between getting the front wheel up and dragging the clutch, you can really keep going. There's a lot of advantage to using it. Of course, if you use it too much, you're in trouble too. Especially when you get in a steep spot like this, you want to use it when you know you're in trouble. And that, of course, can save you. But there's times in which you can just get a bit of a drag on it, not necessarily taking it all the way in, but just enough drag just to slow the bike down and just have a little more control with things. Let's see if we can get it up through here right. Right now I have it all the way in. Brakes on, I can sight my line. Just a little drag. Here. Just run a little drag here. And right up. What I'll do here, this is just something you use for a practice technique on getting a feel of just dragging that clutch. We'll just run right up this little gully here. And you can just slow yourself down. I mean, you don't want to, of course, stall the motor. And that's why you're using the clutch. But you keep just a nice, steady movement, and you can feel that clutch working out and slow yourself down. Then you can actually just start fighting yourself and starting to be out of control and getting yourself back straight. But one thing is you're always trying to keep straight over that bike. Just like in that tape 1. You keep straight over that bike. If so, you have your balance. Well, I've also got the rear brake on to keep myself, but I can do it all with just the clutch, okay? I'll drag it a little. Now the rear brake's off. See it move? Now what I can do, besides just slipping it, is you can give yourself little blips to get the front wheel started up, and that puts more weight on the rear tire and starts you with a little movement. So between getting the front wheel up, dragging the clutch to get the wheel back down, you can start getting some movement. And occasionally, when you have to go up a step or a route, you can add more throttle and get the front wheel higher and start working some leverage with it. Okay, here we go. What I'm going to do here is to show you just a few different techniques and ways to learn different turns and also different ways to lift the front wheel in the air. Notice I've got it just on a small incline, and then that'll help you with your turns, because that's what we're going to try to do here is do some floating turns, and also just getting the front wheel up straight. Now if you do it on an incline, it makes it all just a little bit easier. So what I'll do first is I'll just go up and watch how my knees bend, and I'll accelerate, and you can see the front end come in the air. All right, that's what I'll do first. I'm going to do shorter blips, and I'm going to try to move the bike just side to side when I do it. Ready? Just a little blip. You saw the way the bike started to move side to side, because what's happening there is that the bike is starting to lean in a direction. When it leans, it wants to turn. So I'm leaning the bike a little bit, and I'm doing the same lift. And I'm actually just pulling it a bit like I want the bike to go over this shoulder or this shoulder. And the bike will start to turn for you. And that's what you want to feel. That's the real start of being able to have a lot of front wheel control. All right, so what I'll do here again, I'll be driving up. I'm going to lean the bike a little bit one direction, give it a pull like it's going right over this shoulder. But just like from video 1, tape 1, you keep your body straight up and down. So you lean it over the direction you want to go. And then you give it a little pull like it's coming over this shoulder, just a little bit. But when it comes down, you see you're taking the bike and you're straightening it back up again. So it's going this way and this way. And to get the front wheel up, you're giving a little acceleration. And you can see I'm also bending in the knees a little bit to get that front forks compressed and up. So it's down and up. Okay? Now that we've learned how to do it on a bit of an incline, now you should take the same thing and do it on the flat. So what we're doing is just moving the front wheel just a little bit over in each direction. You're not using any clutch or really any brake at this point. You're just learning the actions using your throttle and leaning the bike just a bit so you get nice little flicks back and forth. What you can do after you start getting a good feel of this, you can start picking objects in which you want to land on. And so then you get a good feel of how far and how much the throttle is doing for you. And it gives you just a good idea just where it's going to land. What I've done is I've set several little obstacles out. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick a line right down the center. And then when I feel, when I lift the bike and move it over, that I can hit it. And it's just really getting a feel of how much movement it takes to do what and how much throttle. And it's just a nice exercise to get a good feel of what you're doing. my third obstacle. This is where the trick stuff comes in. Okay, so what do I have to do? All right, how about let's first start by backing up. All right, now I've got enough room to get over there. But you can see I still have the clutch in. Now what am I going to do? What I'll do is I'll snap it real far over the left and just hit it. Ready? Okay, now what? I'm still way off from the next one. Okay, now I'm back in track. But using the clutch, you see, I've got a lot of options still. We'll just go over and hit this little one. From here to here. But you can see this is what the clutch and the brake can do for you. If you get that first part down where you can feel the lift, right, you start getting a little, or being accurate. But using the clutch, and especially the rear brake, that's how I'm able to stop. Using these, you have a whole lot of new options. The technique we're using with just getting the front wheel to move just a little bit side to side is the same thing you want to do when you're doing what people call a floater, or a floating turn. And what you do is you end up throwing the bike over your shoulder. It, of course, leans in the direction you want to go, and you throw it over your shoulder, but you keep your body all nice and straight. So you always have that firm stance that we were talking about in the first tape. You always want to keep that. And a nice way to practice it, we just have a little tree right here. You can come up, turn your wheel a little bit into it, and then you actually pull it over your shoulder. And that'll get you the feeling of doing the turn. So you know how to get the front wheel in the air, a bit of a turn, it leans in a little bit, and you yank it, and it comes right around. So what we'll do is we'll come, bounce off this tree, and we can swing around, keeping our body nice and straight. But there's also, we've been talking about the clutch. Using the clutch, halfway through this turn, you can stop the turn dead. As soon as you hit the clutch, boom, that front wheel wants to come down. And especially if you use it with relation with the rear brake, then you have a lot of control. That was how I was able to take on our little markers to get it right there and stop it by using that clutch and the rear brake. So what I'll do, I'll do this twice here. Once I'll just hit it and do a nice floater around. Next time I'll use a little clutch and brake. And you can see the difference how you can chop a turn off. And you can use that in the section on picking where you want to be and planing it right where you want to be. But it all comes down to keeping centered over the bike and having all the front wheel control and having confidence of just where that front wheel is. One practice technique I use on getting to learn what the clutch does in the rear brake is stand the bike right up in a wheelie, and you can pull on the clutch and use the rear brake and actually just stall the bike. And it's just a nice exercise to get a good feeling of what the bike does and when it'll do it. And there's also another trick where you can get to the point where you know just when it'll happen, and you've probably seen people do it where they come up and balance on a tree or a telephone pole. But it's the same technique that you want to use. And I'll just show it to you real quickly so you have an idea. Well, what this is, it's learning how to use your clutch and the rear brake at the same time and having timing. You say, what happened? Well, when you're in a situation that you're on an off-camber turn like this, it's real critical where your body is, how smooth you are with the throttle, what you do with the brakes, and if you feel comfortable with the clutch. But if you work at it, you can. The major things you need to be, of course, is smooth. If you give it too much throttle right at this position, because the bike is still headed downhill, so you need to be smooth. But it's the same thing we said in tape 1. You're standing straight up on the bike. You're, of course, pushing it into the turn. And if this elbow is not bent especially, that front wheel is going to be pushed. And so you need to be right up on that front wheel, which is putting more weight on it. Also, what helps in this position, if you drag the rear brake, that also puts more weight on the front wheel. But if you get into a spot in which no matter what you do, it's still going downhill, then you're going to have to start thinking of other alternatives. One of them would be that turn we just showed you, where we're practicing going up the hill, just moving it back and forth. But it's the same thing. If you can stop yourself, give yourself just a bit of a jerk up the hill, you can kind of lift the front wheel out of that trouble spot. You need to be smooth, however. The rear tire is on this angle too. And too much throttle will kick that all the way around. So nice and smooth, you can just gently give it a little bit of a pull and get it out of this spot. And once you get it uphill a little bit, then it's a lot easier. Right, coming down the hill, I've got the clutch in. It just gives me a little more control of me able to go slower. Dragging the brakes, leaning it into the turn now. Outside elbows bent. You want to be nice and smooth through here. Coming up the hill, keep your weight on that front wheel. Starting to slip a little. Same maneuver of lifting it out. Ready? Just pull off to the left. All right, what we're going to do now is we're going to learn to move the front wheel, hopefully without moving forward. And it all comes down to the same type of techniques we're doing on that little bit of an uphill, learning to move the bike from side to side. If you can't do that, you really shouldn't be coming to this point yet. All right? Because it's the same thing where you'd be leaning the bike, you'd be pulling it up. But the first thing you need to learn is on moving this front wheel around is just how to get the front wheel up without getting forward motion. And that, of course, is one of the hardest parts about learning it. What you want to do is take the bike in neutral. See? Neutral. You're going to have to balance on the bike and lift the front wheel straight up in the air. All right? If you don't use the rear brake, you try lifting the front end, you see, and the whole thing just kind of moves around. Now, if I do the same thing by keeping the rear brake locked on, right, what'll happen? Of course, see, the front end comes up. It's with the rear brake on. So to learn to be able to keep that rear brake on as you're doing all these movements, it takes some time and it's hard to do. But if you don't learn that, when you start getting into this exercise, you're going to creep forward. And that's the one thing you don't want to do. You're using this technique to use less space, not more. All right, so here we go. Rear brake is on. See the way it just comes up? And if I do that, of course, without the rear brake, that's what happens. So you must start to learn the rear brake. Just straight up and down. And of course, no engine, just rear brake. Now, you're probably asking, well, how do I keep balance during this whole thing? It all comes down to tape number 1. That gives you how to do your correction. You keep this part of your body straight, and you lean the bike back and forth to hold yourself. You don't want to be doing this or any of this. You keep straight. And I mean, I can't say I do it all the time either, but you have to keep trying. That's the biggest thing. Now, I can get the front wheel straight up and down by using the rear brake. And how do I move it? It's the same as the exercise we use going on that little uphill, moving the front tire from side to side. The bike gets leaned, it's pulled up, and it's squared off. So it comes from here, up, square down. Up and down. So it's leaned, pulled up, and squared off with the rear brake on. I say that again, with the rear brake on. Okay, so we're here. Now try to balance. And we can move it over. But it's the same thing. Keeping your body straight. See the way that front end's coming up? Compression and pulling it up. Get the front wheel in the air. Well, now that you can stand still without the engine and hop it around, and one point I need to make is with any of these exercises, if you can do it well to the left, then do it to the right. Don't ever get yourself with a weak side or a bad side, as one would say. Keep it equal. If you spend time doing it to the left, spend time doing it to the right. And if you know you have trouble with the right, work on the right. What we'll do now is we've talked a bit about using the clutch as just a dragging type of agent. Now, using these hops, we can do the same thing by using the engine and just dragging the clutch against the rear brake. We're leaving the rear brake on just like we were without it. But what this will do, it just gives us an extra bit of lift to be able to get that front end up. And that makes it so you can lift it up hills and in the positions you didn't think you could. But by just using a bit of drag, you can also make it move a lot easier. At this point, then you don't use any of your own strength. You can use the bike instead of yourself. One other thing, with the engines running, it also helps with your balancing. I don't know if you've ever noticed it, but just that flywheel works as a gyro, and it definitely helps you keep balanced. Okay, notice the rear brake is on, and I'm just dragging it. Hear the motor die down? That's working against that rear brake. Now I can do the same thing I was doing with the engine off, but just giving a little power and slipping that clutch. Ready? About this, of course, if you start losing your balance, just a little bit of a jerk, you can get yourself back. But it's by dragging, just dragging it in. Remember, you don't want to get any forward motion with this. So be very careful. You must use that rear brake. Next, we're going to cover the rollback, or backing up. The first type is very easy to learn if you have some of the other things down already, of course. But what all that really is, it's the same technique we were using before, using the rear brake. All right, remember we were compressing and getting the front wheel to lift. All right, it's the same thing, except you release the rear brake right as the front wheel is going to be lifted. So your compression, and really all you need to do there is you just bend at the knees, give you your compression, and when you pull back like you're going to lift the front end in the air, you let off on the rear brake. And it comes down, and it rolls back. Right? If you didn't let go of the rear brake, you'd be down, and you'd be up. So it's down, release the rear brake. All right, so you're here, balanced, compression, release. All right? Just like that. That's all there is to it. Of course, using the engine, you have time to correct yourself and keep your balance. But if, of course, you can learn it without the engine, you're all the better. So let's just try it here with the engine for myself. Another type of backing up, besides just the stationary, is having some type of terrain in which that pushes you backwards. The technique for that is, surprisingly, it's the same as going forward. I mean, it took me a long time to understand it, but it really is true. If I'm going down a hill and I'm turning backwards in this direction, if I could just play the film the other direction, I should be in the same stance as if I was going forward. But it really is true, though. It's the exact same technique as going forward. But the one thing that's, of course, not very nice for your bike is if you start using the rear brake going downhill backwards, it really doesn't do it a whole lot of good. The disc brakes may be something else entirely. We'll see after they've been around a while. But usually a good controllable way is using the clutch to drag and to stop your motion going in reverse. The best way to do it is to just pick a small hill. Don't have to go up very high, but just practice getting just up a little bit and down a little bit, keeping your stance straight, and then when the bike starts to turn, lean it just like you would as if you were going forward. The one thing with rollbacks and any of that, you need repetition, and it just takes time and practice. Every time you go out, just spend 10 minutes doing it. It'll make a whole lot of difference. As for the nose wheelies, you know, it started really as a fad several years ago, but it's really come into its own on being able to use it in the sections. Of course, that was along with the rule changing, being able to stop. Now, the best way to learn it is actually using a helper. And that's why I have this log right here. And what a good way to learn is you come up to it, and it's best to miss your front wheel, just so you don't have that bit of a jerking. But right when the rear tire hits it, if you put on a lot of front brake, and just like before we said with unweighting or whatever with the rear wheel, you basically just want to let the rear wheel come up, so you don't hold it down. It's nice to get a bit of compression before it hits. That also gives it a bit of a pop-up. So what we'll do is we'll come around, hit the rear tire, a lot of front brake, be pulling in the clutch too, so you're not getting a lot of revving, so you can just more or less balance. And so you just come up, you hit it, gives you the helping hand to come up. Okay, well, the next step, after you've learned to come around, get your front wheel around your helper you're going to use, and getting the bike to come straight up in the air. All right, the next step from there is, after you feel a little comfortable with that, and it's of course nice to do it on something soft instead of pavement, so do it on your lawn or somewhere that's not going to hurt too badly, and then wear a helmet. But if you come in, and right as the rear tire is about to hit, you turn either left or right. All right, say I'm turning this direction this way. I'm leaning the bike a little bit in the turn like usual, and I do the same thing where I jam on the front brake. Now what happens is the back of the bike wants to climb up, and then it starts to pivot on the front axle, or on the crown right here. And she will follow this direction around. So if you want to turn it, you come in, you just start to turn, apply the front brake, the rear comes up this way and falls this way. And so you can practice that doing both lefts and rights. So you just start to turn and apply the brake, and that'll kick it from one direction or the other. So right when you're coming in, right before you put on the brake and the rear tire hits, it's nice if you can get some compression on the rear. Get it squatted before it hits. And when you hit, that explosion of it coming back up, along with the front end being compressed and the front end being locked up, that gives you your bounce up. And after a while, you'll get the rhythm of it, and then the helper can leave, and then you can start doing it just on bare ground. What that was, so like I said, I got the front wheel around the log, and I went straight. By going straight, the rear tire will go straight. And if you're coming in, you also notice too, I gave a bit of acceleration right before I hit. And that helped with the compression. And also, if you just get down and when the thing hits, if you just help it up a bit, you don't necessarily have to jump off, but just helping it and getting a rhythm and a timing. What I'm going to do this time is I'm going to come around and I'm going to keep turning to the left. And the rear tire should just kick all the way around to the right. You see the way that movement came in? It came in and then continued on. Continued on. Same thing, but just in the other direction. It'll be turning to the right, and the rear wheel go to the left. There's two other ways to use this. One is having a little speed, and the other is by just standing stationary. Now this first one, I'll just keep a little speed, and you can see how the whole bike and all the suspension works, especially from having just a little bit of speed. See how that whole bike moved there? Now if I was going to be stationary doing the same thing, what I'll usually do is I'll use some throttle. Same thing with dragging the clutch and using the rear brake. Just drag it, and that compresses the rear suspension. And I'll jam the rear down and then pull it over to the other side. So here we go again. I'm coming in. I'll come to just about a standstill. A lot of front brake, I'm slipping the clutch, raising the revs, compression, and lift. But it's all from that same movement of learning how to do that using the helper. So start with a helper, do it on a nice safe spot, and then just keep on and just keep trying different ways of doing it, and it'll all come. And with the nose wheelie, what we're looking for, of course, is the front brake being on to stop the front wheel. Okay? When that happens, of course, the suspension comes down in the front. Boom. And now, so all your weight is transferring forward. If you can have the rear suspension compressed before you put on the front brake, that's going to give you that much more of a lever action coming forward. So what we want is we want the rear suspension compressed, front brake on, which will rear will come up, front will come down. Now what you want to do, of course, is you've helped make the rear suspension going down, and plus a little throttle right before also helps compress it. Now when you put on the front brake, you're off of the throttle, and you can just end up putting your weight really right over the center line with your forks. You want your weight right here on your arms, putting your weight just nice and balanced on the wheel. And usually the clutch will be in, stop the revving. So boom, you're right up. It pivots right on this front position. And then if you were turning, say left, the rear will fall this way. If you turn up this way, you come around this way. And just with a little practice, especially with the helpers, you can just start getting the rhythm and the feeling of it. And I'm sure there's a bit with the body just coming up on the pegs and help twisting the bike. But you can get most of it just with the bars, getting the bike falling in this direction so the rear will follow. All right, getting the leverage right and the suspension moving is really the key to any of the trick riding things. And of course, doing them without the engine's always harder. But if you're doing nothing and there's snow on the ground, you can always do that. But just for the heck of it here, we'll try it with no motor. Balanced. You can feel it moved a bit, not a whole lot. But that takes effort. With a motor, you can make it so it's easier. Now using the engine, once again, get a little torque going, which helps compress the rear suspension. You can just see the difference there with no engine and engine. It just helps to give a pop to it. What I'm going to do here is just run two little short things. One of them is when you're coming down a hill, it's a real good place to practice the kicking of the rear wheel around. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm coming downhill, and I'm going to make a bit of a right-hand turn. And at this point, of course, I'm downhill, the front, doing the nose wheelies, the rear comes up easily, coming downhill. But now I've got a bit of a turn, and so I'll start the turn, do the front brake, the rear will come up, and then kick it this direction. And it's just like we're doing in our practice. We come in, we'll turn a little bit to the right, front brake, the rear will kick this way. Now when I'm here, I want to go up here. Straight up that big thing. And so that's third gear to get up there. First of all, I'll most likely be in first or second to do this. Possibly I could do it in third, but there's no reason really to risk stalling the bike. So I'll come in here in first. I'll kick the rear around. I'll get lined up to where I want to be, click it up to third gear, but now in third gear, I don't really have enough time for the revs to build really by themselves. It would just take too long for the motor to start at the bottom and run all the way up. So what I'll do is I'll take the motor and put it up to the revs I want to climb it at, and I'll have the clutch in. When I get it to the speed I want, I'll just let that clutch out and I'll just let it go. And that whole bike, the rear suspension will collapse, and it'll get all the grip it has, and it'll just slingshot right out. It'll just go zoom, straight up. So we're off. The downhill, I've got the clutch in, and I'm of course just dragging the brakes, getting a nice turn. Getting ready for the kick around, wheels turn to the right. Now I need to get it up in the third gear. 1, 2, third gear. I can kind of side up, but as I get the revs up higher, I know it's going to get a lot of pressure against me. And I'm going to get my toes just pointed down a little bit and make sure my arms don't go all the way out so I don't fall off the back. Here we go. When you're doing any type of turns in sand, the correct technique in your stance and keeping right over the bike is so important. But there's a few other little tips that, can really help you. Of course, if you can get yourself into a rut, of course it helps. But one of the biggest things that helps is if you take that same technique we're talking about of dragging that clutch. So you slip in the clutch and you use a lot of rear brake. What that does, it puts about twice the amount of pressure on that front wheel, so you can really turn in loose sand. And of course, if all that fails, you now know how to stop there and bounce the wheel to whatever direction you want to go. So remember, try slipping that wheel and keeping a lot of rear brake on. So I just keep a nice steady throttle going. I just slip that clutch. And if that fails, you can always just pull it around. And that same technique can be used anytime, really. You'll try it just in your regular turns even, and it helps keep the front end stuck to the ground. But especially when it gets rough and real muddy, in that type of conditioning, it really helps. So I just slipping the clutch, keeping a steady throttle, and then regulating your speed almost with your rear brake, but keeping the rear brake on. The purpose of trick riding, of course, is to change directions of the machine in areas which are too tight to turn around in a traditional manner. You can see right here, he's got to make a very sharp turn. And the first thing he'll probably want to do here is to put around the rear wheel. And as we talked about earlier, he'll compress the rear suspension, and by giving just a little drag with the clutch will help compress it. You can see him. He'll bend at the knees. And see the direction his legs went? They were up and over in the direction where the rear wheel to go. And this, of course, we're talking about using the rear brake for the compression. To be able to push the front end down, and when you want to go backwards, you release the rear brake. Sights the line. Then he'll get his throttle up, doing what we're calling the slingshot. But as soon as he has his bike ready, you can see, watch his wrist. Accelerating that bottom step, and see him skip up the second step. And he's doing that by taking his weight off the foot pegs. He's not taking his feet off the foot pegs, but the weight, and letting that impact bounce the wheel. This is just a regular nose wheelie, but it's really having control and knowing where both your wheels are. And of course, he's shortened the turn, so now he's in a direct line where he wants to go.
As you can see, Shorty is probably one of the best young trick riders in trials today. Many of his bicycle techniques are used in riding a motorcycle. Riding a trials bicycle is excellent training for this sport. It teaches you the one most important thing, balance. Being able to stop, balance, go back, and do different maneuvers on it relates directly to the same maneuvers on a motorcycle. The training programs of the top riders include bicycle and motorcycle riding each day, as well as running and weight training schedules. But most importantly, they ride and practice daily. Jordy usually uses a double blip throttle technique to climb ledges. The first blip raises the front wheel to the desired height. Then, as he adds the second blip, he extends his legs as if he were going to jump to the top of the ledge. Then he closes the throttle, starts standing up, pulls the clutch, and applies the rear brake as the rear wheel just rolls over the top. The single blip technique is used by most of the other riders, and it may be just a bit easier to control and to do. To be able to balance a motorcycle in a position like this with the front wheel up higher or lower than the back requires much practice with the brake, throttle, and clutch. Although you can't see it, he's helping the motorcycle balance with very small inputs of clutch and rear brake. As soon as he starts to get just a little bit off balance, he recenters using these controls. Maintaining your balance is basically just a continuous series of corrections when you start to go off balance. But being able to feel all of this is what makes an average rider a top world rider.
You can see this move he's going to do right here. He throws the bike up over his shoulder like a regular turn, but also unweights to the rear. We didn't cover that really in this tape, but we will, of course, in the next. You can just see how just centered and balanced he is. And that's what takes the time. You can learn that. It's not necessarily just a natural ability. The natural ability helps, but knowing the techniques is what really matters. What's his outside elbow? Just climb way up on that side. See that? And that's what keeps his body straight. You can see how he uses the front suspension and the rear suspension to get a little lift out of the rear, or just to make the front float. We're getting the compression on the front end so we can get a better lift. But it's knowing what the bike's going to do. Using the throttle is so important also, is knowing where you can get grip and where you can't. You can see the leg go out there. What that'll do, if you were, say, falling to the right, where you'd want to put down your right foot, if you throw out your other, you can throw your weight that direction. Once again, shortening a turn. Now it just has to drive straight out. But feeling confident doing these tricks, of course, takes time and practice. If you can get down your basics, especially the things in tape number 1, you're on the way to getting there.
So what is the main thing we need to learn? And it really is balance and being comfortable on the bike. But it's learning how to use the bike underneath it, just like in tape 1, where the bike leans back and forth. You know, but that's what you need to do to keep balance. It's just keeping your body straight and leaning the bike back and forth. Of course, using the brakes and your clutch to add a little drag will help keep you balanced. But if you cannot do that, all these things we've been covering, you're going to have a very hard time with. You've got to learn how to balance. What I'd like to do right now is just show you just some of the little practice things that you can put up almost anywhere. You know, these are just handmade little obstacles, but it's the point of being able to keep your balance and learning how to use your bike and yourself. Right here, I'm going to do a little rear wheel kick. It's just just like I was doing right there, really. Where if you can learn to keep your balance on any position, or regain it in that case, you've got choices. But it's all in balance. And just right there where I was making a real sharp turn, if I would just stand up a little straighter and bend that elbow a little better, I would have made that. So that's something else I can practice. Just a little quicker time through my rear wheel kick, so I'm getting turned around here. Hopefully it'll just make it a little smoother, just a little nicer. Nice quick turn, easy. Do the same thing here. I'm going to be lifting the wheel really far to the right and doing a regular nose wheelie, kicking the rear over to the left. Right here, good strong stance, ready to do anything. So what we're going to do is we want to lift the rear wheel around here. So I want to turn around on this little flat space. So I like my rear to be lifted a little farther this way. So like we talked before, I'm going to have the front brake on, clutch will be in, rear brake will be on. I'm going to compress the rear suspension. And I'm doing that by bending my knees, and right as I'm starting to stand up is when most of the pressure is put to the rear wheel. At that compression point, I'm going to be continuing to straighten my legs, which will push my weight off the foot pegs. My feet will stay on the pegs, but my weight will come off. I will take my weight and come up and over to take the rear and slide this way. At the same time, I'll be taking my left arm and pushing this way, which you see it pushes my body back, which at the same time my legs are moving, and getting a nice force on here, which is just taking that rear, just wanting it to slide. Okay? So we're ready for all that. But the unfortunate part, it's got to be all done quickly, and there's a certain timing you have to get with the rear suspension. All right? So same spot, got a good stance. Solid stance. We see balance. Balance is the key. Next thing we'll do is what we're doing down in the woods with the little log, getting a rear wheel kick. This is just a good way to get practice. The cement block's easy to find. What I'm doing, I'm driving in and I'm turning. Say I'm turning to the left. It's going to make the rear of the bike do what when I do the nose wheelie? If the bike's leaning too far this way, it'll want to tuck over and throw you in a ball. But if you keep the bike just lean the direction you want to go, barely or almost flat, when it hits, the bike will want to come up this way, and then of course follow the direction of the rotation here, which would be this way. So I'm looking for nice height, nice easy kicks. It's a good place to practice when you don't hurt yourself landing on concrete or something. Wear a helmet. So this is what I want to do. Turning in. What I try to do is make my turns quick enough to, of course, keep my feet on so I don't have to do any other turning besides doing the lifting. See, I can come right back on it. this one so much is because we're going to put the front wheel on this higher section over here. If your body position is not correct, you will not be able to make this turn. If it's correct, you can make it. All right? But of course, one problem getting the lift from here, notice how much my elbow's bent. If it's not bent and my legs aren't standing up, you can't make that turn. See how much I'm right up on that thing? And when your fist is in your mouth. And if it's not there, if I'm at all back, I'll keep my arms out a little bit. See from back here, but I must admit I'm expecting it, but you can really see how much you've got to stand up. And if you can find anything like this around you, it'd be a great thing to learn. Get used to getting the lifts, front wheel control, body position. I mean, it's got everything. So I'm dragging the rear brake a little bit, put a little extra weight on the thing. I don't know if you can see, but the front tire, when I use my rear brake, you can just see it dig. Well, thank you for joining us for part 2 of the video school. We hope that you're able to use these things and take the time to practice them. We know you're serious because you have the tape, but it's taking the time and practicing. With the next tape, we're going to be covering a little more of the sections and just the different situations you get into, along with covering a few of these items a little more in-depthly. So thank you again, and I hope you enjoy it.